get everyone's attention up front. The main portion of this test, Chance, Daniel, the main portion of this test is knowing the 5 different ways to solve a quadratic. We can solve by graphing. We can solve by taking square roots. We can solve by factoring. We can solve by completing the square. And we can solve by quadratic formula. We've practiced factoring quite a bit with like our systems. It's one we've seen a lot, so I'm not going to do a factoring one. But I am going to review completing the square and quadratic formula. Those are the 2 that we really need practice on. So when we solved by completing the square, it was a totally different setup than most of the other ones. Almost every type, I guess 3/5, so over half, it had to be equal to 0. But completing the square was different. How should we have completing the square set up? Zach? Variables on one side, which means what's on the other side? Numbers. Okay, the constants. So I've got to move some stuff around for this particular problem. Right now, we do not have everything in its correct spot.
Add 5.
Okay. I heard an add x. That'll take my x from the right side to the left side.
Wait, they don't have to be from the equal sign? It's like one on the left side of the equal sign has to be like the variables and the other.
Yeah. The variables should usually be on the left side, the numbers on the right. So this is bringing the x to the left side. I still hear too much chatting, like Angelica. Okay. Okay. Carly also said, hey, let's subtract 12 because that'll move my number to the right side. So we combine now. X squared minus 4x. Colby.
It was negative 12.
Plus a blank spot. When we are completing the square, we had to remember to put in our blank spot before we put our equals negative 12. Completing the square was weird that way because we have to remember to bring it on our own. It's not really going to be indicated anywhere. We just have to remember, put that blank spot there. And if I put a blank spot on one side, you have to do it to the other side. Hopefully my voice does not sound like that. Okay, so then we came up with a shortcut. We came up with a pattern that made this quicker so we didn't have to do box method with this one. We take the middle number, divide by 2. That gives us what goes in our perfect square binomial. So we actually find the number that goes down below first, and then we can find the number that goes in our blank spots. What did we have to do with this negative 2? We had to square it, which would give us 4. So negative 2 squared gives us positive 4, which goes here and in the other blank spot. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Andrew, Abraham. Okay.
I seriously go to throw it because I know I can make it from here. But then I know it's probably
We are talking about math right now.
I probably could.
So where did I get the negative 8? Why did I put negative 8 there?
Negative 12 plus 4.
Negative 12 plus 4. We can combine those together. Those are like terms. I can add them together. So now I need to get x alone. I'm trying to solve for x. So Daniel, what's the opposite of squared? Okay, square root. Stephanus and Daniel are both correct. Square root. So when I square root, Sophie, what happens to the squared and the square root? Cross it up. They cancel each other out. Which also means I don't need the parentheses anymore. If I don't have the squared there, the whole point of the parentheses was because we had the squared. I can get rid of the parentheses. And every time I square root something, what should happen? We should write a special symbol in.
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus. So x is almost all the way alone.
Add 2.
Add 2 to both sides to get x completely alone.
Yeah.
Now, I cannot add 2 to the 8. Why can I not add 2 to the 8? They're basically not like terms. One's under a square root, one is not. So we usually put the 2 in front of the square root symbol. No, I would not dock you points unless, this is why we usually put it out front. If you did -8 and you drew your square root softly and put +2, and made it look like the 2 was under the square root, I would dock you points for it, because the 2 is definitely not under the square root. So if you were careful with your square root symbol, it wouldn't matter. Okay. Now I can simplify this. If you can simplify, I do want you to simplify. And we did practice simplifying or completing the squares. So when we simplify or completing the squares, we're focusing on the square root itself. I'm going to write this work to the side. Square root of -8. I need to simplify this by doing a factor tree. And we have to remember, what does it mean to have a negative under the square root?
Have a negative.
Are you supposed to take it off?
Okay, we are supposed to change the negative to something. But what does it change to?
Nothing.
Nope, not to the plus or minus. We did plus or minus no matter what. This one we talked about a little bit. I think I just heard Noah say it. I. Remember, negative under a square root really meant I. So if I change that to an I change the inside to a plus. We should do that first, and then we should do our factor tree. Okay. There won't be many I's on the test. Maybe like one. Okay. But now we need to do our factor tree. Things that multiply to be 8.
4 and
4
2.
times 2. Not add, multiply. 2 times 2. That's a common thing that happens. We want to add instead of
It's
multiply.
just dang.
So we get 2 times 2 times 2. We still have our I out front. We're looking for what size of groups? 2. So 2. So we bring 1 out front. We leave 1 inside. So then our
2i.
final answer would be 2i square root 2. So we get 2 plus or minus 2i square root 2. This is our final answer after we have simplified completely. Can you say that one more time, or was that not an actual question?
It was a joke.
That's another joke.
Sorry. I know.
Another bad.
I'm slow. No, literally I'm slow. Like sometimes I just can't tell when people are joking.
Oh.
So that's only when there's a negative, right? Read that.
Yes. We write an I when there's a negative under the square root.
So when you like watch comedians, do you not know if they're
Well,
joking?
then I know they're joking. But if you're joking in the middle of a normal conversation, sometimes I miss it. Sometimes I miss it. Okay, does everyone have that written down before I go on to quadratic? Or quadratic formula, sorry. Yes, I do want you to write the entire word problem down, otherwise this won't make much sense.
I was fucked up. I was messed up.
Alright.
Huh?
I look up to almost blank screen and then
That's what you're
Yep. Okay.
What?
So quadratic formula and the discriminant. We will have some word problems on the test. We've seen some word problems on our homework. We could, if you wanted instead, you could write Daniel as building a rectangular garden.
Erase it and
Careful,
put Danny.
everyone else tried.
He wants one side 2 feet longer than the other side, and he wants the total area to be 100
That way,
feet.
that way.
It's too late, I already wrote Kevin.
He already wrote Kevin, don't change it.
Oh,
Daniel asked first. Sorry,
Hey.
Danny.
Well, it's my name too, so I don't care.
Hey, I got you. All right, Danny.
Alright,
Just for you.
alright.
Good.
7.
So, you will have to work with some word problems. Some are easier than others. This one does require some setup, that we have to set up our own quadratic. Sometimes they just give you the quadratic, and usually you just have to set that quadratic equal to 0, and that's what the word problem is telling you to do. This time, it didn't give us a quadratic to work with. We have to make it ourselves. So Daniel is building a rectangular.
Wow. Just kidding.
He wants one side 2 feet longer
Oh,
than the other side, and he wants the total area to be 100 feet squared. So before I start working on the problem, I do want to make sure everyone has this written down. So I'm going to pause for a second while everyone writes this down. So we are talking about area of a rectangle. What do we know about area of a rectangle? We do know that from the problem, but just in general, what do we know about area of a rectangle?
you multiply all the sides.
You multiply the sides together to get the area.
I'm hungry.
So here's our rectangle. Now, we don't know anything about the sides except that one is longer than the other. So if we don't know something, we usually give it a variable. We say, well,
X.
I don't know what this is. I'm going to call it x. But we do know the other side is 2 feet longer. Okay, so I heard Hannah say it. X plus 2.
Oh,
If it's saying it's longer, we add 2 to that variable.
Well, that's cool.
And we know the entire area is 100. They gave us those 3 pieces of information.
Is it 100 squared?
100 feet squared, yes. So not 100 squared. It's only the units that are squared. So we said area of a rectangle is what? Did we say it already? I can't remember.
48.
So it was the sides multiplied, so usually we write that as base times height. Base being one side, height being the other. So now I can replace each of these. What do we know the actual area is?
100.
100. What do I know the base is? X. What do I know the height is? X plus 2.
Yeah, shouldn't it be x plus 2 and then x?
That doesn't really matter.
2x.
So now we have to simplify this enough that we could solve. So we need to distribute. We need to multiply by x. We get 100 is x squared plus 2x. And if I'm going to solve using quadratic formula, because I wanted to practice quadratic formula this time, I need this to be equal to 0. So what should I do to make that happen? Minus 100.
Minus 100.
So we get 0 equals x squared plus 2x minus 100.
Is this the A, B, and C?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. This is the A, B, and C. We do need to remember what is the quadratic formula now. You will need this memorized for the test.
Why?
If you need the song to help you, go back to the lecture. It's on YouTube.
Hey, is this the
No, where are you?
Y equals ax.
I'm not going to sing it again. You can
Please.
listen
You
to it
have
on
to
YouTube.
sing it.
I know the formula.
Wait, I wasn't here. I
Okay,
wasn't here.
Heather knows the formula. So,
Negative b plus or minus.
You have to
square
sing.
root b squared minus 4ac
Sing it, sing it, sing
sounded
it.
evil.
Sing it, sing
You
it.
guys will be okay.
Sing it, sing it. Sing it.
Okay?
I will not be. Do it.
Sing it.
No, thank you.
Sing it.
Maybe I'll play the YouTube clip after we do this.
Wow.
That's not
Okay? So if we're going to use that formula, we need to know what A is, what B is, what C is.
Oh.
So we have to look at our equation and identify A, B, and C. A is always in front of x squared. Always. So Zach said A is 1. B is always in front of x. So what is B? 2. C is always the last number without the variable. So C is negative 100. And we do not include 0 in this at all. 0 on the other side of the equal sign is not A, B, or C. Sometimes we get a 0 here if one of them is not written, but this 0 that's on the other side of the equal sign is not part of what we're considering to be A, B, or C. So now, we need to plug this into the quadratic formula. Everywhere I see a letter, I need to replace it with the number we said it was. So we get x equals negative 2 plus or minus square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 100 all over 2 times 1. I replaced B. Everywhere I saw the letter B, I put a 2 because we said B was 2. Everywhere I saw the letter A, I put a 1 because we said A was 1. Everywhere I saw the letter C, I replaced it with negative 100. So now we need to simplify this. We're going to do some side work here so that we can also talk about the discriminant. I have 1 or 2 questions where I don't even ask you to solve. I just ask you to tell me what type of solutions will there be. Remember, there are 3 possibilities: 2 real, 1 real, and 2 imaginary. So this underneath the square root is called the discriminant, and it tells me that information. It tells me whether we have 2 real, 1 real, or 2 imaginary. Okay. We'll find out. We don't know until we get one number here. We don't have one number here yet. Okay. So we have to simplify this. Do I do my multiplication, my subtraction, or my squaring first? Squaring comes first. So we do 2 squared first. We get 4. At the same time, I can multiply these first 2 together. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. But then I just bring the times negative 100 down. So again, we have to multiply first. We do negative 4 times negative 100. 400. So 4 plus 400 is 404. So then we have to decide. This number tells me whether we have 2 real, 1 real, or 2 imaginary. That was way too far, sorry. So if it's positive, which this one is, what did positive mean?
Real.
2 real. What if it was negative? 2 imaginary. And, oh, sorry, I wrote 0 instead of negative.
Couldn't it be positive and 1 real also?
Nope. One specific thing meant 1 real, and that was 0. 0 meant 1 real. So it's definitely going to be one of those 3 things. Your number is going to come out positive, negative, or 0. If it comes out positive, 2 real, negative, 2 imaginary, 0, 1 real. So if I just asked you what type, we would just need that information over there on the right. If I ask you to solve, we need to now complete this quadratic formula problem. So negative 2 didn't simplify. plus or minus. We did all that side work already, so we know this is 404
Is that gonna be the final answer?
all over 2. No.
Why?
We are going to talk about how to simplify this now. So in the past, most of the time we left it here. I can simplify this the same way we simplified completing the square. What did we work with to simplify on completing the square? We did the factor tree of the square root. So again, I need to work with with 404. And I want things that multiply to be 404. We're almost done. Nope.
You know what I mean?
Where the number is so big, if this ends in a 4, what do we know it definitely divides by? 2. So let's start with 2, because we're not sure what it would divide. 4 would actually also work, but we're going to do 2.
Why?
So 2 times 202. How would I get the 202 if I wasn't sure? If we didn't know what this was, we could do division. 404 divided by 2 gives us this. So then 2 would work again. 2 times 101. And then 101 is actually prime.
If you do 404, like, if you do 4 times, you could do 4 times 101
And then 2 times 2. Yep, that would still work. So we would get 2 times 2 times 101. We look for our group of 2 and bring that out front. So we would end up with negative 2 plus or minus. What is that square root of 404 going to change to be? 101, but what about what came out front? 2 square root 101 over 2. Now, unlike completing the square, it's possible for me to simplify further. Because we have this division, I could simplify further. I need to check these 3 numbers, so all the ones that are not under the square root, and see if they could divide by anything. If they can't, we're done. If they can, we are not. What can all 3 of these divide by? 1, yes, but we want the biggest. 2.
It's a prime number.
So we would get x equals negative 1 plus or minus 1 square root of 101 over 1.
I'm hungry.
Can't help you with that. So that's our simplified answer. Now this one was a word problem though. What does this really mean about the length of the side? We're not sure. So we could also plug this into our calculator to figure out what do we really mean by the length of the side. So if you get out your calculator, I want to make sure you know how to find the square root button.
I didn't know it.
If you have the old school calculator, it's it's second x squared. If you have the new one, it's control x squared. My calculator is being slow, starting up. Because we could also get a decimal for this and actually use it in context of the problem. Sorry, it's kind of slow. After this, we're done, and I'll hand out your assignment. Okay, so we had okay. So I need everyone to quiet down again. If you're going to get to the square root button, you hit Control, guys, Control x squared, and it'll bring up the square root. Oh, except we needed the whole problem. We had negative 1, so we start with negative 1.
Wait, how'd you get the square root again?
Control X squared.
plus, and then you do control x squared. And inside, let's see, actually, no, it was just inside 101. Oh, so your calculator on the new school ones likes to make stuff exact. If we want a decimal instead, if we just hit control enter, it'll give me the decimal instead. So that means our garden was about 9 feet, 9.05, so basically 9 feet by, the other side is 2 feet longer, so by 11 feet. So 9 feet by 11 feet. If we did the other one, if we did -1 minus square root of 101, and I'm going to hit control enter right away so we get a decimal. Why do I not care about this -11 in context of our problem?
You have a negative.
You can't have a negative length. It just doesn't work.
Unless you sell part of it and you're like down 11, then you have to buy it back.
Okay. Let's assume we cannot do that.
Wait, hold up. How do you get the decimal? Control what?
Control enter.
How do you get the second?